House of EdTech, Episode 38.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karina Gonzalez. I'm a high school library media specialist, and I love listening to House of EdTech.
Support for House of EdTech comes from todaysmeet.com. Add back-channeling to your classroom today and take advantage of the ability to add embeddable chat rooms to your blog or website. For more information, go to todaysmeet.com/houseofedtech and by helphub.me. Check out the world's premier online tutoring marketplace, helphub.me. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Christopher Nessie. And the House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. My objectives include discussing technology that is changing our classrooms and schools and sharing tools and tips you can hear about today and use tomorrow. I talk to teachers, leaders, and creators like you and have them share their stories. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way we teach and how our students learn. Thanks for coming on back to the House of EdTech. Coming up in this episode, I have a great EdTech thought. I have an awesome House of EdTech recommendation. I have, of course, the House of EdTech VIP, and I'm going to be sharing a recent conversation I had with Mr. Josh Gauthier, who is a technology guru from the great state of Wisconsin. But before I get to my conversation with Josh, I do have a couple of announcements to share here at the top of the episode. First and foremost, I'd like to give a big welcome to Jethro Jones and his podcast, Transformative Principal, which has recently joined the Education Podcast Network, which is over at edupodcastnetwork.com. You could check out the Transformative Principal on transformativeprincipal.com, which you can also get to through jethrojones.com. It's a podcast about amazing principals doing amazing things, and if you're at all interested in education leadership, principalship, anything along those lines, Jethro has a number of episodes out. I believe he is almost on episode 80 in his catalog of great content. So check out Transformative Principal, and welcome to the Education Podcast Network, Jethro Jones. Also, coming out today, and if you're listening to this, today would be June 21st, there is a new episode of Podcast PD, the podcast, where Stacy Lindis, AJ Bianco, and myself talk about grants for podcasting in your school, and we also make some great podcasting gear recommendations, and also part of our conversation talked about some great uses for podcasting with students in your classroom. And you could check out the latest episode of Podcast PD, the podcast, over on edupodcastnetwork.com. And of course, I will link to both of those in the show notes. There will be a couple of announcements coming up after the featured content and some of the other segments that I do, so I hope you stick around to the end of the episode. With that, let's get into my conversation with Josh Gauthier. Currently, Josh is a technology training specialist at the Unified School District in Pere, Wisconsin. Josh is focused on improving the use of technology in the K-12 environment. Josh also has a passion for teaching and training adults and professionals in technology, as well as helping schools integrate more programming into the K-12 setting. He's a Google man, he's a certified Google teacher and Google trainer. He's also on the presentation circuit, presenting at numerous conferences on topics including personalized learning and coding integration for schools. And he's also a internet friend of mine. We are co-hosts on the Tech Educator podcast over on teachercast.net. Welcome, Mr. Gauthier, to the House of EdTech.
Well, thanks for having me, Mr. Chris Nessie. It is an honor to be a part of this particular podcast. You know, it's fun being co-host, but, you know, I always kind of felt that everyone else had a little more star power than me, so it's super cool to actually get interviewed. I'm blushing even though people can't see it.
So what you're saying is our friend Jeff Bradbury talks too much? That's what it sounds like.
No, he's just assembled like the Avengers of podcasting. And that's a really bad analogy for me to make because I'm sure your listeners are probably going to crucify me, but I've never seen the Avengers. But I generally know the mix of the superheroes in that club, and I feel like you're the Avengers, and I'm kind of like Underdog, who is my favorite superhero of all time. My dad has some funny stories about my love for him. So it's like Underdog joined the Avengers, and I'm just trying to keep up.
Josh, don't beat yourself up. You are, maybe you're like Hawkeye.
And you'll have to explain that to me later, but that sounds great.
Let's go with Hawkeye. So, Josh, what you do, you use technology. So that's one of the ways that we got connected, again, through, the Tech Educator podcast. Talk a little bit about what you do in your position as a training specialist in technology. Talk a little bit about how they're using Google Chromebooks in your building.
All right, absolutely. I have become a huge fan of Chromebooks, and I'll talk more about kind of my feelings on Chromebooks in a second. We all know where that comes down to. You and I can talk all day about how great Chromebooks are. I love Chromebooks. But at the end of the day, the decision is made on money. I mean, you can get a lot more Chromebooks for the price, and it just makes sense from a financial decision where schools are today. That being said, that's a really good deal for that price with what Chromebooks can do. And being a Google Apps school, it's the perfect fit for us to have Chromebooks. And just the time savings of using those is the first thing. There are a lot of benefits, but if you want to get a teacher hooked on a Chromebook right away, the computer's up and running in seconds. I mean, I remember I taught in a lab. Kids would come in, they'd log in, and it would take a couple minutes for the whole class to get in. And that was when things were running smoothly. And I mean, if you think about it, okay, a couple minutes, yeah, that's well and good. But a couple of minutes added up over the entire year, that's hours. That's a lot of hours. So that really preserves instructional time. You don't have to worry about the dog eating the homework. You don't have to worry about somebody forgetting to save. Those are all great features of using Chromebooks because you've got to use Google Apps. You've got to use Google Docs. In that case, you don't have other options. So those parts are great. I mean, there are other negatives as well, but I don't like to focus on those. Like I like to tell.
You say you focus on the positives of Chromebooks in education. What do you think are the negatives or a negative to Chromebooks in education?
Well, I think that there are a lot of things that I would like to do that I can't. One thing that I think has a lot of potential, at least at this point in time in education, is Minecraft. That's not happening on a Chromebook. Not without some very significant technological jerry-rigging, because you can dual boot to Linux on a Chromebook. Theoretically, in that case, you could put Minecraft on there, but that also voids the warranty and does a whole lot of other stuff and it's just a pain in the neck. It's a lot of work. I actually got in a little bit of trouble because I tried to do that to my school-issued Chromebook earlier this year. And once I got to the point where it said, if you go past this, you avoid your warranty, I'm like, maybe this isn't the device to be experimenting with for this.
Maybe that's a project for the makerspace.
Yes. So that's one area where, just kind of branching off of that, downloadable programs. There's a lot of good stuff out there we can't use. So, yeah, there's a lot of web resources, and I mean, that's been my main focus is what can we use that's online and freely available. On the flip side, those things, things aren't always free, and what free means can mean other things. Nothing is free. My economics teacher in high school said that. It might be free of monetary cost for us, but there's other trade-offs.
You're also very interested in coding and scratch coding. My only real experience with coding that I can recall in elementary school, I did do you remember the Apple Turtle? Like pen up, pen down.
Like a logo?
Yes.
That logo? I know of it.
And I was in second, third grade, but I'm more of a what you see is what you get kind of coder. I use like Dreamweaver and, very simple things that I can manipulate because I'm more visual. But talk about coding and Scratch and clue us in.
So when it comes to the classroom, coding is something that, like I said, I never took a coding class. I know we had it in my high school. A lot of high schools don't. And then you go further down the line in middle school, and basically it's non-existent at that level. And I feel like we're missing something, because it seems like if nobody is learning it at that level, where are we going to get programmers from in a world where everything's digital? And I've actually had discussions with this with people who are in the computer science industry. There was one guy I talked to who, he didn't think that computer science should be something every kid takes or every kid learns. And he thinks that, programming certain things, it's all going to be apps, and it's, there's just not going to be a big need for it. I don't know. It's hard to tell because the future is just so volatile. You don't really know.
Yeah, but those apps don't write themselves. Right.
And there are programs and things to shortcut, but somebody has to write the code that writes the code easier. So somebody had to write the code that allows you to work with Scratch to translate that. So that way, when you drag that, when you press the green flag block, the program knows what that is. It doesn't know the block. It knows the text. It knows all that other stuff. And you have to understand that. So for me, I think about that. I think there's really a huge opportunity here to teach kids. So finding little opportunities to get coding in is really, I think, where we're going to have the most success, because then you kind of get you get kids an opportunity to taste it. So for instance, one area I see us being able to get the ball rolling here is by integrated activities. For instance, with 8th graders this year, I was in 8th grade in an 8th grade history class, and we used Scratch to create animations and games to demonstrate their understanding of different amendments in the Bill of Rights. But they got to create something original out of nothing. They got to practice those computational thinking, those problem-solving skills of figuring out how the code works. They were in teams, so they had to collaborate and work together. And then they had this polished, well, I shouldn't say polished, but they had this published finished product that they could share out there and other people could experience. It was interactive. That's a hard thing to do on so many platforms, except with coding, and really in this case Scratch, which is a pretty simpler introduction to it, that you can go into a classroom of kids who may have never used it, and 2 weeks later they have a product that they created that demonstrates their learning, but they also coded. So that to me is really where the power's at. Now the challenge is getting into classrooms when teachers have time to do that type of thing. But if a lot of teachers were doing that, the kids are already going to be comfortable with something like Scratch. And then that can become a gateway to getting those kids into some other things.
Now, have you found success in your position where you are maybe able to help one teacher, like take that social studies teacher in your example. Now you have other people that once you have that influence on them, do you find that they help get the message out? Like when that social studies teacher talks to other social studies teachers about Scratch coding and doing a project like that, are they helping to go out and share the good word that you are imparting on the building?
I think in some cases, I don't feel that I got a lot of fruit out of that particular investment, at least right away. But in other cases I have. So it really just depends. And it's possible that, she did talk and say good things about it and it just didn't work out with other people, and that's fine. But like this Amazing Race activity that I've been really touting lately, and something that I really got to experience and learn about at the Google Teacher Academy last summer, that's one where I've seen a lot of people take that on, because it's a lot more cross-platform, and it takes away that, with coding, there's always this intimidation factor that, you have to be kind of nerdy, you have to really be into it, it's going to be tough, and I think people just initially have that feeling about it. But with the Amazing Race type activity, it's like Google My Maps, boom, you put a pin on here, you put some info in here, you put a link in to a form, and boom, they're pretty basic things that anybody feels like they can do.
When you say Amazing Race activity, I think of the TV show, and I've never watched the show, but to say, oh, that's on, and I changed the channel. No offense to the Amazing Race fans out there. Does this activity relate to the show that I know nothing about?
Loosely. And there, I will say this.
I was going to say, help paint that picture for us.
Yes, I will do that. Sorry. That's a good idea. So it does relate to the show in a way. And I think it's customizable that if you wanted to make it something where people are moving around and completing things physically and, getting cards and clue cards, you could do it that way too. I mean, that kind of game-based learning or gamification, I think that kind of falls into both realms, is effective. But where I kind of learned it and what I use it as is using a tool called Google My Maps. You have an option to create kind of your own custom map in a way where you can put your own pins on for different locations. You can make shapes on the map, and then you can customize those pins with pictures, and you can put text in and links, and you create kind of really interesting maps, I guess, another word to use there, that tell different stories.
Don't feel bad. I don't know a synonym for maps either.
Yeah. So, for instance, this Amazing Race activity, the way I set one up is that on one map, I have the starter. We start, here's our first challenge. Maybe your first challenge is just to get a group of 3 together. You make a quick little Google presentation. You put a little bit of info about each person in the group on there. You share it so that anybody with the link can see it. And then you drop that link into a form. And that form is linked, on that point on the map. After they submit the form, there's a link to another map or another place online that they go to. And it kind of goes down the rabbit hole. Really what this is a lot more similar to than maybe even the Amazing Race TV show is a pedagogical approach that Lisa Highfield had coined called hyperdocs. So I don't know if, Chris, if you're familiar with Lisa Highfield, but she does this thing called hyperdocs, and really it's the same concept where you use hyperlinks. It's kind of like a web quest on steroids. She'll set up these beautiful documents or drawings that link to other documents and presentations and that link to resources. It's a flipped pedagogy is what it is. It puts the learning in the student's control and that they are the drivers of that content knowledge acquisition. And the teacher is the one who's just setting up the learning experience. And when you do that, I haven't seen a teacher yet who's tried that method and hasn't had positive student feedback and positive results from it because, the kids like that opportunity to be in control and be agents of their own learning. And when you set it up as an engaging, somewhat competitive activity, it gets them going a little more. It's something out of the ordinary, yet you're still getting your content in there, which is good.
That's crucial to get the kids engaged.
Well, that's really what it's all about. Well, some people will argue with you on the terminology there. I use engaged. I think that word's fine. I read a really good blog post by, I think it was Carl Lindgren-Stryker recently, who said, well, aren't we really looking to get kids to be curious? That way they're kind of driving their own engagement in that way. So, I say two sides of the same coin.
I was going to say, but it still boils down to engagement. And anybody who wants to challenge me on that, please email me.
Yeah, and lots of fun conversations we have in the educational and technology realm. But yeah, that creating those engaging experiences is really where the joy of teaching comes from. Is really where you can get kids to enjoy your class and really take up that content that you're trying to cover with them. Because ultimately the students are probably not going to remember most of the information that we cover. Think about us as adults. What do we remember about our 7th grade history class? Probably not a whole lot, unless you had some pretty amazing experiences that still stuck with you. So trying to find those things is always the key. And if there's something like this Amazing Race activity, which is pretty easy to scale, pretty easy to duplicate, I think that's super positive.
And you can't have enough positivity in education. So what are you doing with makerspaces? What's your involvement? Are you the leader of the makerspace? Do you work with the people who do it? How do you fit in? All
right. So I think thinking back to the Amazing Race, I should probably describe makerspace in case somebody isn't quite familiar with that term. And I get this a lot because, in my district currently, I just received a very nice grant, a $10,000 grant to establish makerspaces in the 2 buildings I work in. which is awesome. Like, I'm super excited. I can't possibly translate how excited I am about that.
That is grantastic.
Yeah, it is grantastic. I mean, it's nice to be able to spend money and not have to think about it.
When it's not your money, so yeah, go for it.
It's a creative space where, I hear people, like to say that they want to be able to tie it to curriculum. I'm not necessarily of that camp. I think that's important, and if we can use it that way, that's valuable. But I think just having a place where students can come and be creative and do some things that they don't get a chance to do in other classes. So having this makerspace area, this place where they can be creative, let's say work with Raspberry Pis and programming, for instance, we talked about that and how that is really important to me. One of the things I'm including is Legos, it's just building stuff, but that could be so applicable to other areas. Maybe it's a concept in science, or maybe it's a scene in history, or maybe it's something for a writing prompt. I mean, there's a lot of tie-ins you can make with that. But also it's a form of expression, and that should not be undervalued. I don't think that's any less valuable than writing an essay. I think building something with Legos should have equal weight to writing an essay, and I can feel free to debate on that. But
you'd be preaching
that to
me.
Is important. I got some other things too, or will be getting some other things. I got a 3D printer. I think to me that is kind of the trophy piece of a makerspace. It's not necessary. I think a lot of people see that as being a cornerstone. But to me, I thought, students have access to one at the high school. It's something that when they get up to that point, it's actually part of their curriculum. So that would be a natural marketing point almost for the high school program, that they could do something with a 3D printer here. And you could tell those kids, hey, if you take these technology education classes at high school, you can do more of this 3D printing. You can learn more about designing these objects and doing things that are functional for daily life. Let's say you broke something. You could print the replacement part for literally pennies or dollars and save a lot of money that way. So that is another area that's super cool. And
not for nothing, if you have the 3D printer and you consider it the trophy, you can actually use the printer to print parts to make a trophy.
Yeah, didn't think about that. That is definitely project number 1 next year.
There you go. Get that filament ready.
Yeah. So it's just super cool. And, it's another thing. I don't really know where I got started on this whole makerspace thing, but I do think it's kind of tied back to the first time I saw the video for the Makey, the Hack a Banana, Make a Keyboard by Jay Silver. It's a great TED Talk. I think that last winter, that might have been the catalyst for my current getting all up on the maker bandwagon. I saw that, and that just that video literally blew my mind. I could not comprehend what was happening. I couldn't get enough. Raspberry Pi, I really wanted one of those. I was following the Raspberry Pi since that thing was announced, and I thought that was so cool. And, when you talk to kids about computers, they don't always understand what a computer is. And when you show them a picture of a Raspberry Pi and you tell them this is a computer, it really messes with their heads, because that totally goes against what they know. And the new ones they have, and I'm really excited that the timing of this grant, they just came out with the Raspberry Pi 2, which is supposed to be like 6 times as fast. They really beefed it up quite a bit. It's amazing what they're able to do for that price point. It's just so exciting. I mean, if you break a Raspberry Pi, you're out $35. I mean, nobody's going to cry over that, or not many people are anyways. So it's really lowering the cost of experimenting and lowering the cost of getting it into kids' hands. That's super exciting, because I don't think at any point in history we've had this opportunity. If you could get kids access to this stuff and get them interested in it at an early enough age again. So it's not something that's seen as nerdy or uncool or only for boys. It's got to be something that everybody sees as being important.
You have an event, and this is where it's kind of like you're on NFL Radio Row to, like, here's why you're here, sort of. You're involved with the Q Rockstar group, and that's Q as in CUE. Talk about Q Rockstar and what's going on in Michigan this summer.
So Q Rockstar was started by John Crippo, who I think most people who listen to your podcast are probably familiar with. And if you're not, you better get familiar with him, because he's the man. But he started this as his Google Teacher Academy action plan to connect that one lone nut teacher from all the different schools and get them together just to create some amazing things. And it's 3 days of hands-on stuff. And in a change from all the other conferences you go to, the faculty start each day with what's called the shred session to pitch why the attendee should come to their session. And then the other kind of the rule of thumb is no more than 15% of your presentation or session should be lecture. It should be hands-on. The participant should be doing something. They start pretty late, like 9, and I think there's a light breakfast involved. Then they feed you lunch. Lunch is 2 hours. You can eat, you can talk, you can network. I mean, how many times have you gone even to an ed camp that's made for talking, and lunch is over way too fast, and that new connection you made, now you're going to different sessions, or you continue talking and you miss some sessions, that kind of stuff. So no more, it's capped at 100 people. Once it's 100 people, it's full. So like that really small faculty to attendee ratio. I think there's a lot of teachers who attend these that end up becoming either faculty of other Q Rockstar, Google certified teachers, Google certified trainers, Apple distinguished educators, those types of things. And I know they're just titles, but those titles mean something. Those titles mean that those people are exceptional, that they're willing to go above and beyond. And that's the type of person that this event draws. So to me, that's just amazing to be in a place with, a dozen faculty who are as if not more passionate, more intelligent than myself, and to be around teachers who are willing to give up 3 days of their summer. Granted, Saugatuck, Michigan seems like an awesome place to hang out for 3 days, to come and do more school stuff, but obviously all to get better and all to be better for our kids.
Now, are you involved in the planning of this, or are you a first-time attendee, or have you gone to these events before?
So being in Wisconsin, Q is out of California. So there aren't a lot of Q opportunities near Wisconsin. So my only real involvement with Q was the Google Teacher Academy, which Q helped put on. So for me, my connection with this is being a Google certified teacher and being connected with John Crippo and hearing about the events and being encouraged to apply to be faculty. So this will be my first time attending. So I'm as excited to attend as I am to present, and maybe I can sacrifice my sessions one day just to attend some of the other amazing sessions that are going on. We'll see how that works, because I'd love to learn from other people as much as I'd like to share some cool things as well. So that's my connection.
Now, without tipping your hand or revealing too much, what are you passionate and getting ready to present on, if you can share a little bit about what you're going to be doing?
Well, I've talked about a couple of them already. So I will be doing one on the Amazing Race. So the whole goal of that session will be we'll do one together, and then the participants will then create one in their own content or passion areas. And so that one's going to be one of the sessions. I'm going to do one on Scratch. So we're going to be building some stuff in Scratch, which is going to be awesome. And then I have another one in there, which I'll leave close to hand right now. I would say it might be the most useful for productivity and efficiency for teachers of the 3 sessions.
Now, for people who want to maybe find out what that mystery session is, as you described it, or to go in on the other ones, what can my listeners do who are in that area or may be in the Wisconsin area? What is the dates? July 7th through the 9th of here in 2015. Where can they go to get more information?
So that'll be in Saugatuck, Michigan. You could take a ferry from Wisconsin to get there, but it is on the western side of Michigan, kind of towards the southern part. And they can find more information at qrockstar.org. All the camps that they have in 2015 are out there. So not just the one in Michigan, but there's one in Boston coming up. There's a lot in California, and a lot are sold out or selling out soon. So you got to get on it soon, because you might miss the opportunity. So they can go on the website. They can see more about the camps, where you might be staying, things to do, as well as the registration link is out there as well.
What else are you looking forward to this summer, or other events or presentation opportunities?
I am really pumped that for the first time, and granted, relatively short amount of time in education, this is only my 4th year, I will be getting to go to ISTE, and I am really excited because it came up pretty recently that we could go and that we're getting paid for to go. And I mean, I think it's a great investment on the part of our district because there's so many amazing things happening there that we can bring back to really take our district to the next level. But I've kind of looked forward to going to ISTE as this kind of big goal out there. And the big reason is that's where all the inspirational, amazing people that I get to communicate with in text on Twitter and, G Plus and all of that, I get to communicate with them. But when you get to actually meet those people and be with them in person, it is always a million times better and more powerful. And you're never the same after you meet them. You always feel like you are better just by being in the same air as them. And I know that gives people kind of a lot of credit, like a mystical thing, but it's not. It's really what it's all about, that fellowship, that community, that networking. And that's good that we sharpen each other that way, and that you want to up your game because you're around, Chris Nessie, who is this great podcaster, or you're around who's some other people.
So another Chris Nessie with a podcast? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I know. Or like Rafranz Davis, who is just amazing with the issues of minorities in education and educational technology. And you have, obviously I could pump up all the people in my Google Teacher Academy cohort, like Tara Linney, who's big on the coding front, David Saunders, who is also kind of big in that realm as well. You've got, there's some big ones like Jamie Cossip is usually there. I think Mr. Cybrary Man, who's seems to know everything about everything, or at least has it curated. I think he usually goes. I mean, it'd be amazing to snag a selfie with him. So there's just a lot of amazing people to meet. But I'm probably looking most forward to not really meeting necessarily kind of those big people, but like people that I communicate with a lot that I would consider my friends, like my tech educator people, my Google Teacher Academy people who I either haven't met or have only met one time. I'm really looking forward to reconnecting because it doesn't happen often. I live in the middle of the country. There are a few of us around here, but like you guys are on the East Coast. There's a bunch of people on the West Coast, and there aren't a lot of opportunities as teachers for what we make to just travel around and meet each other. So really, really looking forward to that.
And I am also looking forward to ISTE because I wanted to go last year in Atlanta, couldn't swing it, i.e. finances. But being from New Jersey, I'm going to be able to basically commute to ISTE. So I'm actually, the way I see it, and to me, again, I'm into the, networking. I'm looking forward to, shaking your hand, sharing cheesesteak, popping a root beer, as the case may be. But I feel like I'm going to come away from that thinking, wow, it was like 8 weeks of summer camp condensed into, 3 or 4 days. For people who can't get to ISTE but want to connect with you, how can they do that?
You can find me at plus Josh Gauthier out at G+. You can read my blog that I really need to post because it's been quite a few months and I have a lot of things I want to say. I'm just trying to sit down and actually write. So that is mrgtechchats.blogspot.com. Maybe one day I'll actually splurge and go ahead and get the MrGFactOfTheDay.com, which happens to be my Twitter handle at MrGFactOfTheDay.
Mr. G Fact of the Day on Twitter. Now, that's a unique name and kind of says a lot about you. Can you give us a fact of the day today?
So would you like a more risque kind of borderline one that's pretty funny but maybe a little edgy, or would you like one that's a little more tame?
Let's go with tame, Josh.
The aorta of a blue whale is large enough for a human to crawl through. So like a human could literally crawl through the heart of a whale.
That's interesting.
That's pretty incredible, actually.
I think that's a good place to end, crawling through the heart of a whale. Now that people have your contact information and a fact of the day, I know that my audience is going to reach out to you and they will find value in you. And before I do let you go, I do want to take the time to personally here on the show thank you for your previous participation in the show way back in episode 26, where you demonstrated the OK Google for my 26th episode at the end of 2014. So thank you in person for that contribution.
Oh, absolutely. It was fun. I do that all the time. Sometimes I'll do it in class just to kind of show it off, or for no particular reason, if I just need to look something up. But yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate being on the show. Like I said, it's kind of weird for me to be interviewed, because I just kind of see myself as normal, and I see the people who get interviewed on podcasts as being kind of super cool people. So I guess this makes me a super cool person.
I would have to agree. I only bring on people who are interesting to talk to, and that's why I let them do most of the talking.
Absolutely. And the best part is your listeners are not literally going to know the half of it.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Josh, I look forward to seeing you at ISTE, and the door is always open for you to come back on anytime.
Thank you.
And now for my EdTech Thought. This episode's EdTech Thought is inspired by a recent blog post on ditchthattextbook.com, which is authored by Matt Miller, who is a teacher and blogger. And this recent blog post was titled 9 Free Ways to Grow as an Educator This Summer. I'm going to link to the full blog post in the show notes for this episode, but a couple of his 9 points that I wanted to highlight here on the podcast were to get involved with the ISTE 2015 hashtag on Twitter during the upcoming ISTE conference, June 28th through July 1st, and that's going to be taking place in Philadelphia. I'm lucky enough to be able to attend ISTE this year, and I will be there on Monday and Tuesday. So if you're also going to be at ISTE, make sure you try and connect with me on Twitter. Again, the username is Mr. Nessie, MrNesi. And using the hashtag is a great way to take advantage of the professional learning without having to spend the money. Now, one of the other popular hashtags in addition to ISTE 2015 is going to be the Not at ISTE 2015 hashtag, which I've already seen some tweets online about some Google Docs that are being started, and it's going to be basically like a virtual conference that you can also connect with people who are also not at ISTE. And if you're going to be at ISTE, again, please reach out and connect with me. I'd love to shake your hand, meet you, and have a face-to-face conversation, because there is a lot of value in that. Another point that Mr. Miller makes in his post is to start to consume podcasts this summer as an educator. And I'm actually really fortunate to be one of the podcasts that he recommends, along with fellow Education Podcast Network podcast, Truth for Teachers with Angela Watson. Some of the other podcasts he mentions, Every Classroom Matters with Vicki Davis, the Bedley Brothers Ed Chat with Scott and Tim Bedley, Edu All-Stars with Todd Nessaloni and Chris Kessler. Also on the Education Podcast Network, Principally Speaking with Jason Bodner. And one of my new favorite podcasts, the Wired Educator Podcast with Kelly Croy. I'm going to link to all of these podcasts in the show notes as well. And if you just click on the link to Matt's blog post, you'll also get the links to those great podcasts. And podcasts are an awesome way to learn without having to do much other than listen. It's easier than reading, and it doesn't require the same attention that, say, watching a video would require of you. And I'm also going to share one of Matt's little secrets, as he mentions here in his blog post. Matt Miller is also the co-host of an awesome new podcast that is about student engagement that's going to be on the BAM radio network, and that show is called HoET. And he's going to be co-hosting that show with Jed Dearybury, who is a second grade teacher from South Carolina. And that podcast launched on May 26th, which you can check out in iTunes or through the Google Play Store. And two of the other things that I'd like to point out from the blog post that I found a lot of value in and recommend to you is to get involved with Twitter chats over the summer, and also to connect with a lot of people from your PLN, or connect with them in a new way using a tool like Voxer. I really like Voxer because it is, like Twitter, only audio. So you don't lose a lot of the meaning, and because you can use audio messages, you can go a lot longer than 140 characters. Now, don't worry when the Voxes get long, you can speed them up to 2 or 3 times, and if you're like me and you're from the East Coast and you understand when people talk really fast, you can speed it up and you're going to understand it. Sorry, but there's no way to slow us down. I actually wonder, would that be, if you had the ability to slow me down, do I talk too fast? I don't think I do. But maybe I do. Let me know in some feedback. Now, I've only shared with you a few of the things that Matt talks about in his blog post, so definitely 100% I recommend that you go and check out the full blog post over on ditchthattextbook.com, and you can get to that through the show notes for this episode. That's my EdTech thought. And now for this episode's House of EdTech recommendation. I'm actually going to be sharing 2 recommendations. That's right, 2 recommendations for the price of 1 podcast episode. You can thank me later. The first thing I'd like to recommend is called Slides Carnival. Slides Carnival creates and provides free presentation templates that you can use with Google Slides. You can find templates that are formal, inspirational, creative, simple, elegant, and playful. Slides Carnival was created to help people create meaningful content without worrying about the appearance of their slides. There are some amazing templates on Slides Carnival. I've recently got into using it, and they're so easy to use. You click on the one you like, it goes into your Google Drive, and then you have all these different varieties of slide styles that go with the theme that you picked. And you can manipulate them and do whatever you want. The only thing that you have to do is just give them credit, and that's usually done in one of the final slides of your presentation. So check out Slides Carnival at slidescarnival.com. And the second recommendation for this episode is Green Screen by Do Ink, and this recommendation comes to us from Dan Gallagher. Dan's here to talk a little bit more about Green Screen by Do Ink, so take it away, Dan.
Hello, no one is available to take your call. Please leave a message after the tone.
Hello again, Mr. Nessie. This is Dan Gallagher, a teacher resource specialist for technology with the West Windsor-Plainsboro Regional School District. iPads and smartboard integration in elementary classrooms is the main focus of my position. I'm back again with another House of EdTech recommendation, Green Screen by Do Ink. This is a paid iOS app which in combination with a green screen allows a user to create images or videos of people anywhere their imagination can place them. I don't normally go for paid apps, I try to stay with free, but this app was definitely worth the buy. I assisted a few third grade teachers recently after they completed a study of the Northeast region. The students were required to select 5 locations like the Liberty Bell or Empire State Building. We positioned them in front of the fabric to take photographs where they appeared to be at these locations. They then used the images to create a 1-page comic of their road trip journey through the Northeast. During a science unit on the solar system, students gave an on-location report from the surface of a neighboring planet in the Milky Way. This app is quite easy to use and produces high-quality images and videos. I highly recommend going to the App Store and purchasing Green Screen by Do Ink, and then let the students' creativity take off.
Thanks again, Dan, for submitting that awesome recommendation. I really appreciate that you took the time to record it and submit it. Thank you so much, and I'm sure everybody will find value in Green Screen by Do Ink. That's, or rather, those are this episode's House of EdTech recommendations. And now it's time for this episode's House of EdTech VIP. Congratulations to Robert Pennington. Mr. Pennington is a middle school social studies teacher from Rhoton Middle School in Norwalk, Connecticut. He's got an extensive education background. He studied secondary education and social studies at Niagara University. He earned his master's degree in special education from Fairfield University, and more recently got his administration credentials from Sacred Heart University. In 2014, he was honored by the Daughters of the American Revolution for excellence in teaching American history. Robert is a lifelong learner who attends conferences, loves all things technology, and is always trying to implement new tools to personalize learning for all his students. He believes in collaborating with others to foster conditions that create a highly relational and 21st century learning environment where creativity is nurtured and student learning is revered. He's doing some really cool things with blogging, photo editing, the flipped classroom, digital citizenship, and animation. I believe you need to connect with Mr. Pennington. He is on Twitter. His username is Rob Pennington, the number 9. That's ROBPENNINGTON, the number 9. And you can find his school website and professional online content over at robpennington.weebly.com. There'll be links to that in the show notes for this episode. And congratulations, Robert. You are the House of EdTech VIP. Thank you for listening to this episode of the House of EdTech, made possible once again by Today's Meet. Head over to todaysmeet.com/houseofedtech for more information about how you can add back-channeling to your classroom, and also by helphub.me, the premier online tutoring marketplace. Keep the conversation going. Make sure to visit the website, chrisnessy.com. Over on the website, you can review the show notes for this episode, again, number 38. And of course, as always, and you can go back and do this for any episode, I would love your thoughts and comments on the information and resources that are shared. You can leave a comment on those very same show notes, or you can email me directly, and the email address is feedback@chrisnessy.com. And you can also submit audio feedback, just like Dan Gallagher did, and many other people before him. You can do that by calling the listener feedback line at 732-903-4869, or you can connect with me on Voxer. I recently changed my username to Mr. Nessie, just like my Twitter name. If you do want to connect with me on Twitter, that's the username, Mr. Nessie. I want to also take a moment to thank a couple of people who left some awesome iTunes reviews for me. Thank you to Chopstick Sensei, who says, quote, "I've been listening to the House of EdTech since almost the beginning and haven't missed an episode. Chris does a good job of mixing it up. From featured interviews to the EdTech Thought to his VIPs, there's something out there for every educator who is striving to stay connected. Definitely one to add to the top of your listening list." Thank you, Chopstick Sensei. I really appreciate that. And also thank you to John Mason from the new Beard Ed podcast, which we talked about in episode number 37. Thank you, John, for your rating and review of the House of EdTech. John said, quote, "Chris Nessie does a tremendous job getting awesome content and guests for his podcast. The sound quality is superb, and he offers his unique, pragmatic, and realistic take on educational technology." Thank you again, John. Check out John's podcast, Beard Ed, over at jmason.me. Now, if you enjoyed the House of EdTech, I would really appreciate a 5-star rating and a positive review in iTunes from you as well. 5-star ratings and positive reviews help keep the House of EdTech front and center for others to discover and enjoy. You can also show your support through things like patreon.com by going to patreon.com/houseofedtech. If you're an online shopper and you happen to go to my website, which I'm sure you do, up in the menu bar of chrisnessy.com, there's a button that says Shop Amazon. When you click that link, any purchase that you make, whether it's electronics or a birthday gift or a wedding gift or just anything you may purchase on Amazon, Amazon will give me a little piece of the pie. Doesn't cost you anything extra. You just do your online shopping the way you do it, and you can help out the podcast. On the next episode of the House of EdTech, I'm going to be speaking with Miss Casey Cohen, who I had the pleasure of meeting at EdCamp Philly back in May, which will get released on July 5th, 2015. So I'm really looking forward to sharing the awesome conversation I had with Casey. Once again, thank you for listening, and remember, using technology isn't difficult. That's right. Just give it a try. The House of EdTech is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. For podcasts for educators and podcasts by educators, go to edupodcastnetwork.com. And if you're looking for some great content related to being an administrator, I really recommend checking out 3 of our podcasts, one that's brand new to the network, again, Transformative Principal by Jethro Jones, Principal PLN by Teresa Steger, Jessica Johnson, and Dr. Spike Cook, as well as Principally Speaking by Jason Bodner. These are 3 great podcasts for current administrators and anybody who is an aspiring administrator. Check out those 3 podcasts over at Education Podcast Network, and the website again is edupodcastnetwork.com.